Right. So at the beginning of the year, I played this game for the very first time. This is Prince of Persia: The Forgotten Sands, and how do I put this? I was a little bit. The word is disappointed. The word is disappointed because what I saw here was a lot of potential, and this game has some very cool sections, especially in the platforming. Actually, it is platforming where this game shines in some places because it has very creative, very inventive platforming puzzle designs, especially with the thing that you can control water, where you can freeze water and use it. And there are some cases in which you have to really time it because you have to freeze water to get to one place, but then you have to unfreeze and freeze again. It's really cool. It's really cool. The problem with this game is that combat sucks. Combat sucks. It's terrible. Combat is it's boring. It hardly ever poses a challenge. It's stupid, to be honest. It is very stupid. It tries to be based on what little I read, they were trying to make it kind of like a Dynasty Warriors game, but I feel like they failed miserably, and that's a shame because these have potential. The story kind of sucks. The story kind of sucks, but it did add some elements to the lore of these games. Now, why am I telling you this? Why am I talking about Prince of Persia: The Forgotten Sands? Because as I was telling a couple of my friends that I disliked this game, and we were talking about the others, the other trilogy, because not the other trilogy, but the trilogy that this game is a part of. We were talking about the Sands of Time trilogy. And I was like, you know what? I haven't played those games in maybe 2-3 years? Well, Warrior Within, I haven't played in 2 years. Two Thrones, I haven't played in 3 years, I want to say. And Sands of Time, I hadn't played in, 7 years? 9 years? Maybe more. So I was like, you know what? Since I played this game, since I played Forgotten Sands, why don't we go back and we play the trilogy? So I did. I went and I played Prince of Persia, the Sands of Time trilogy again. I went over all of the games. I went in order. I started with Sands of Time, I continued with Warrior Within, and then I finished with Two Thrones. Now, in terms of gameplay, these are very good games. These are very well-designed games. These are very inventive games, especially for the time. But here's where I'm going to make the 1 or 2 people who are watching this hate me a lot. My least favorite is the Sands of Time, the first game in the series. I was actually telling my friends when I was talking about the Forgotten Sands, and I was like, I haven't played at the time. I was like, I haven't played those games in a while, and I was like, you know what? I might replay Warrior Within and Two Thrones, and they were like, but why are you ignoring the first one? And I'm like, and I was like, I just don't like it, and they were like, but why? And my response was, why indeed? Why is it that I don't like the Sands of Time? Why is it that I don't enjoy Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time as much as I enjoy Warrior Within and Two Thrones? So because here's the thing. Before this playthrough, I had played Warrior Within, and I'm not joking, like maybe 100 times. And again, I'm not joking when I say that. It's not an exaggeration. I can definitively say that I have played from start to finish Warrior Within like 100 times. When I was in high school, I broke my my leg once. This was in 2007, so I had to spend like 2 weeks in my house before I could return to high school. And all I did during those 2 weeks was play War Within. And I remember that I would start, finish, and as soon as I finished, I would start again, finish, start again, finish, start again, finish. And that's what I did for 2 weeks. And that's not counting all the other times that I finished and played this game before and after that. I love War Within. And Two Thrones as well. I also love Two Thrones. Sands of Time, not as much. So I was like, why? Why is it that I don't like it? And so I did. I went and I played the 3 games. And I think that now I have an answer. Let's go back to when I first played these games. Let's go back to when I first came into contact with this particular series. I was in high school. And I remember that at the time, what I had was an Xbox. I had an original Xbox, and I borrowed a couple of games from one of my high school classmates, and one of those games was Prince of Persia: The Two Thrones. That was the first game that I played. This was around, I want to say 2006, 2007. I don't know. Somewhere around that time. I had never played a Prince of Persia game before. At the time, it was my first time playing a Prince of Persia game, and I loved it. I loved the Two Thrones. There was something so organic about the controls and about the platforming, the way you control the prince. There was something so realistic about it. It clicked. It immediately clicked with me. The fact that in other games, what happened is that in other games you would press, for example, I don't know, you press a button and your character would do a lot of animations in one press. But with the prince, you don't. For example, let's take the Two Thrones as an example. When you're running on a wall, right? And there are these little etches, I want to say. I don't know how you could call those. Where you can use the dagger to get yourself attached to the wall so that you don't fall. But here's the thing. In other games, that would be like a context-sensitive action, right? Animation. Your character will immediately grab or latch themselves to that edge in the wall. In the Prince of Persia, you have to press a button. And I know, it's just the press of a button, but there's something so organic, something so natural, something so realistic about it. For some reason, it reminds me of real life. Like in real life, you have to do movements. Your body has animations for everything that it does. Like, for example, here's my mouse, right? I don't just move my hand to it and, the mouse sticks to my hand, right? It's not like this. I have to grab it, right? I have to use my fingers to actually grab it. If I don't use them, it will fall. I know this is a stupid example, but it's really similar to what you do in the Prince of Persia, in the Two Thrones. Everything that you do is an action, right? And you control that action. So if you don't press square, you're gonna fall and you're gonna die. So there's a lot of... You cannot blame the game. That's what I'm trying to say. You cannot blame the game whenever you fall, whenever you die in these games. Because everything is on the player, right? Everything is on the player. Yeah, that's what I want to say. Everything is on the player. So I fell in love with Two Thrones. I remember that I played it a lot, and the game at the time, you could, if you completed it and you had enough SAM credits, I don't remember, you could unlock the trailers for the first game and for the second game. So I would watch those like over and over again, and I was like, wow, I really want to play these games. So I remember that during my birthday that year or the next one, I don't remember, my friends, they got me Prince of Persia 1 and Prince of Persia 2. Actually, they got me the second first. Yeah, actually. No, I remember. I got the second game on my own. Because here's the thing. If you are already an edgy teenager who likes rock, who likes metal, and you get the Prince of Persia, Warrior Within, darker, metal soundtrack, you got all of Shadi's butt in the screen. Prince of Persia, Warrior Within, it was targeted for edgy teenagers like me. So of course I wanted to play that game. I got it, and like I mentioned, I played it non-stop. It was something so... There was satisfaction in me every time I played Warrior Within. There was something so... Because it had everything... it had everything that the Two Thrones had, but it had, that edginess, which of course my teenage self would be drawn to. So yeah, I played that game a lot. Then, on my birthday that year, my friends, they got me a copy of The Sands of Time. I didn't like it. Now, if you notice, I played them in reverse. I started with the Two Thrones, I went back to Warrior Within, and then I played Sands of Time last. I think that's important, because I think that order in which I played those games informs, or rather is responsible for most of my perception of those games. Here's the thing. I consider that the golden years of gaming were the 90s and the 90s and the 2000s. From 2000 to 2010. And the reason I believe that is because during those 2 decades, games would evolve constantly. The technology was evolving, developers were testing, developers were trying new ideas, genres were, video game genres were being developed. And there was this constant improvement. There was this constant sense of betterment. Everything was better with the sequel. Maybe not completely better, but you could see that there was improvement. Like, if you played a good example, God of War 2 is much better than God of War 1. God of War 1 is a great game. Yes, God of War 1 is a great game, but 2 is just better. Because they improved animations, they improved the combat, they improved exploration, they improved your skills, they improved magic, they improved everything, they improved boss battles, they improved everything. The same happened here. In terms of gameplay, you could see how Prince of Persia 2 is a way better game than Prince of Persia 1. It is more responsive. It is smoother. The animations run much more smoothly. Everything is more fluid. So, going back, playing in reverse, I started with a game which had very organic gameplay on the Two Thrones, because in Warrior Within you don't have some of the context sensitive player input platforming that you have in Two Thrones. You don't have those. I'm talking specifically about the edges in the walls and about the windows, which I don't know why they call them windows, because they're not windows, but those little things on the wall that you use them to propel yourself to another wall or to another floor, to another whatever. But you have to press X, so the prince would use them and use the momentum and jump, whatever. Warrior Within doesn't have that, but it has the great responsive gameplay and great combat. That's another thing. These two games have Two Thrones and War Within have great combat. Sands of Time, the combat sucks, and there's my answer. There is my answer, by the way. I finally realized why I really dislike the Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. Because this time around I was playing, and when I began playing the game, I was like, I don't know why I hated this. This is nice. The environments are great. The platforming is good. It's not as responsive or as fluid as the other two games, but it's great. Then I got to my first combat section. More specifically, my first combat section with sand monsters. And then suddenly I remembered. Suddenly it made sense. Suddenly I knew why I had only played this game twice before. Because the combat sucks. The combat in the Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, the combat in Prince of Persia 1, actually Prince of Persia: Sands of Time, the first in the trilogy, the combat sucks. I don't care what anyone says, the combat sucks. The combat is terrible, the combat's boring. Farah sucks. Farah can go to hell, you have to take care of her, and it's annoying as fuck. So no. That's why I hated The Sands of Time. Because combat is terrible. It doesn't help that the final boss is a joke. It doesn't help that. It doesn't help this game's case in my eyes. That the Vizier sucks. The Vizier is a terrible final boss. It's very, very, very anticlimactic. I think that's the word that I'm looking for. It sucks. So the game's good. The game's really good. Objectively, I know why people love it. Don't get me wrong. Objectively, I understand why The Sands of Time is a very beloved game. I understand why people really like it. I understand why people are really attached to it. But I don't enjoy it. I much more prefer War Within and the Two Thrones. If I'm being honest, I much more prefer War Within and the Two Thrones. Because here's the thing. Most of the criticisms that the War Within got, those were based on aesthetic. Those were very subjective. But based on aesthetic, most reviews that criticize the game are focusing on, I don't like the new environments. I feel that the game is darker. I feel that the music is too noisy or too punchy for me. The tone is darker. The tone is more aggressive. But all of those were aesthetic complaints. Most of those reviews really ignored the gameplay side, and the gameplay is amazing. The gameplay in War Within is just great. Like I mentioned, they improved the animations, they improved the responsiveness in the prints, they made it so that the game flows way more smoothly. And the combat is just, I'm gonna say this, after playing these games, after recently playing these games now with really thinking about them, I can say that the War Within and Two Thrones, especially War Within, where the focus is more on that combat, is one of the most how do I put this? Is it versatile combat systems? Is it fluid? Is it smooth? I don't even know how to put it, but it's such a well-designed combat system because you have so many options, and that's why the combat never got boring in this game. Yes, you could probably just run, ignore all enemies. You could probably do that. In some sections that's going to be more difficult than others, but for the most part you could ignore every single mob encounter. The reason I never do that is because the combat is so satisfying. Everything that you do could be followed up with a different action. So for example, if you grab them, let's say that your prince only has one sword, so it has a free hand. You can grab them with triangle, you can choose to choke them, you can choose to throw them either in front of you or do like a backflip and throw them behind you. That's very helpful to throw those freaking ninja assassin women. That's great to throw them off cliffs, to just deal with them. You could try to steal their weapons. You could slice them with your sword. If you jump at them with X, you could, jump behind them to do a kick, because you could choose to do a kick or a sword slash. You could try, if you don't have a sword, if you don't have a secondary weapon, you could choose to try to steal their weapon. Or you could jump away from them and to another enemy. If you run against the wall, you can jump. You can use it as impulse to do a kick or a slash. You could run upwards and do a kick, or you can jump upwards and do a somersault with slashes. The combos are dynamic. They can change. You could choose to do two secondary weapons and two main weapons, or vice versa. You could choose to many options. You have many options, and the environment is your help. Like I said, you could use the walls to impulse yourself and use like a kick or a sword slash, or you could use that to run. You could use it to run upwards and do a somersault slash, or a somersault spinning, lots of kicks, whatever. Or you could use it to jump and get away from enemies. The combat is so dynamic. Every single time, you have so many options to deal with the combat. It's great. It's incredible. And here's the thing, because it was funny, because when I was talking with my friend last time, they were like, I prefer the combat in Warrior Within, because in Two Thrones you are forced to do the stealth mechanic. And I was like, well, that's the thing. Yes, the game wants you to do stealth, but Two Thrones has the same combat system as the second one. They didn't change anything. The only thing they did was they added these stealth sections, and that's it. Now, I do think that Two Thrones punishes you for failing the stealth minigame, the stealth quick times to get over any mob encounter, especially those in which you need to close the sand portals that the Vizier uses. Now, when I say it punishes you, I don't mean the fact that like as an insta-death. That's a great thing, that the game doesn't have like an insta-death. But I do feel that enemies in Prince of Persia 2 Thrones, they hit harder and they take more damage in order to be done with them, to deal with them. I believe that's the way in which they punish you for failing the stealth mechanics. Now, you can always rewind. That's great. You can always rewind and try it again, but if you need to fight, it's nothing like, it's not impossible, but I always definitely feel, especially when I comparing with Warrior Within, that the enemies in Two Thrones, they really want you to do stealth. They don't want you fighting one-on-one. Now, I mentioned the sand powers, the rewind and the slow. Again, great mechanics, very inventive. I've never seen any other games do what they do, rewinding. It's a way of, hey, here, you screwed up, but you get another chance. You don't instantly have to do it all over again. We're giving you one chance to vindicate yourself, one chance to try it again. It's very well. The slowing of time, it's really good. It's because you could use it for combat and really trivialize pretty much encounters, bosses. For puzzles, you could always ignore the slow time mechanic and just do the puzzles like at normal speed. But if you feel that they are too difficult, then you can just use the time slow, and it's great. It's again, it's an option. I feel like those are just ways in which to adjust difficulty, but they are ways that adjust difficulty that go beyond enemies hit harder and take more hits to fall, and I think that's great. That's another complaint that I have with the Prince of Persia: Sands of Time, by the way. Why do you slow time in that game? What's the point? When the prince himself also slows down? I don't know. Again, I swear I don't hate the game. I just don't enjoy it as much as the other two. Alright, now, I think I have nothing else to say about the gameplay. I feel like it's just great. Oh no, I have another thing to say. Here's another thing that the Sands of Time did worse than the other two games. And again, I don't hate the game. I don't hate the game. I just health upgrades. All right, sure. In the three games, you have to look for them, right? They are not. There are a couple that are obvious, that are too obvious for you to see. Hey, look, here's definitely something. This is not the path that you need to follow to progress. So here's something. Go check it out. But in most cases, they really made you look. They really made you look. Now, in the sense of time, you find the corridor, the secret passage, or the hidden corridor, and you just go there, and there it is. There's your health upgrade, which is a good thing. It's a reward for exploration. Okay, so that's great. But what they did in World Within and Two Thrones is that, okay, you found the secret corridor, but now you have to work for your health upgrade. And they have those are what I consider boss battles, in the sense that they are boss battles of boss platforming sections. I don't know if that makes sense, but they are, because they are definitely more difficult than what you can find in the base game, like in your regular path. What the challenges, the setup traps and the platforming that you have to do in to get the health upgrades, they're in some cases way more difficult than you would find at any point in the game. So I think that's great, because it's a challenge. It's like, again, okay, so we reward you for exploration, but at the same time, work for your reward, and I really like them. Every time that I play these games, I go for all the health upgrades, just because I find them. I think they're fun. It is fun to go out of my way to get them and to do those trap challenges. I enjoy them. With the Prince of Persia one, well, you get them. That's fine. That's fine. But I much more prefer the other method. And yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say in terms of gameplay. I think, because boss battles in the Prince of Persia, in Sands of Time, you have two boss battles, one against your dad, and that sucks, and one against the vizier, and that sucks. So that's it. In World Within, you have a couple more boss battles, and they are more interesting. You have the Griffin, you have the obviously you have Kailina, you have Shadi. What I like about the fights against Kailina and Shadi, by the way, is that they follow the same rules as fighting regular mobs, as fighting regular enemies. So you can do the same combos, you can grab to them, you can do the same. You have to fight normally. So it's like a way buffed up mob, and I think that's great, because it's like, okay, you've been fighting regular enemies. Now, here's a test. Go fight. And I really like that. You can counter them, you can parry them, you can do anything that you do to a regular enemy. I think that the only type of attack that you cannot do to them is grabbing them and throwing them. But other than that, you can just fight normally, and I always enjoy those fights. It's great. In Two Thrones, they took it a step further, and they made them like puzzle bosses, and I really enjoyed the bosses in the Two Thrones, because it's not just go and deal damage, because at the end of the day, that's all you do in World Within. It's like, go deal damage, and that's fine. So the bosses are fun, but in the Two Thrones, it's more like, okay, complete this puzzle to win the fight, and I think it works. Maybe not all of them. I think that the fight against the lady, the chain lady, that one is boring, to be honest. That one is just boring. Also, they rehashed the animations from Shadi. Whatever. But yeah, in terms of boss fights, that would be like the only one that I don't like in Two Thrones. The others are fine. The others are very good. The steps that you have to take to kill those bosses, it's fun. I think that's it in terms of gameplay. Now let's talk about story. Now, before I say any of what I'm going to say, I would like to premise this part by admitting that, and this is just conjecture. This is just conjecture, by the way. This is just conjecture. But I think that at the time, they were focusing much. They were focusing more on the gameplay side of things and on the plot. Emphasis on the plot, not on the rest of the story. I don't think that the creators of this franchise, they were trying to do lore. I don't think they were trying to do that. So most of what you see in these games, I think it has no significance in terms of lore, that is. That being said, I think, and again, this is conjecture, I think there are a couple of details here and there that tell me that there were some intentions. And to be honest, Forgotten Sands is the one that makes me think that. Here's the thing. In the Forgotten Sands, we learn about jinn magic. We learn about jinns, period. And we learn that they control a lot of aspects about the supernatural, the magic of this setting. I think that was interesting because in this game we meet the character of Razia. She is a jinn who used to work for King Solomon, and she is like the jinn of water. I noticed that in every single garden in the trilogy, every single place that had like a garden, every single place that had like a water thing, there was always the statue of a woman. For example, when you get to the gardens in World Within, there's the first thing that you see in the center. There's the statue of this woman, and she's in the middle of some ponds and stuff. So every time there's water, there are statues of women, and the same happens in Sands of Time, because I was paying attention, and the same happens in the Two Thrones. So there's a nice little connection there. Obviously, the health upgrades that you get in Sands of Time, you were definitely traveling to the realm of jinns. Definitely. I also think that the health upgrades that you get in Two Thrones, those, because those fountains, they always have like an object. It's like it always seems like a very mystical object. I think those were jinn offerings or jinn related artifacts, and I believe that they were hidden to help maybe the kingdom of Babylon. I don't know. Again, right now I'm just making a lot of conjecture because again, I don't think there wasn't a lot of lore planned, but I think there are some connections here and there. I thought that was interesting. Also, a water sword in Prince of Persia Warrior Within, right? A water sword to kill the Haka. Interesting. I'm also thinking right now that the Haka is a jinn. Here's the thing. In this game, in Forgotten Sands, Razia explicitly says you need jinn magic. You need the power of another jinn to kill another jinn. Well, a water sword named after Razia. Also, Razia turns into a sword in Forgotten Sands. Maybe that was a water sword. So, I don't know. Again, conjecture. Lots of conjecture. I think the plot in these games is really good. The time traveling aspects are, in my opinion, very well done. I really like the theme of consequence. That there's this constant theme of consequence throughout the stories. That everything that happens is based on consequence. And the prince has always been trying to correct those mistakes, but he always tries to correct instead of accepting and facing the consequences. That's the thing. That's the fulcrum of this story. That the prince is always trying to undo instead of face, and I believe that's very, very good. And I really like that in the third game, he really, because at the very beginning, I think Kylina, when she's narrating, she says something like it wasn't love. It was more like duty. It was more his tendency to fix. Okay, mistake. I need to fix. But never. The prince's first instinct is never to accept. He's always like, I need to fix. Who knows? I feel that in the second game, Warrior Within, we are playing as the Dark Prince. That psyche. There are many theories out there about the Dark Prince. I think the most explicit one is that he's just his darker self, right? And that he is, a manifestation of his greed, of all his, dark emotions, etc., etc., etc. I definitely feel that on the Island of Time, during that adventure, we were playing as the second prince. Here's the thing. These games, if I'm not mistaken, I think I'm not, but these games came out with 1 year of difference between each of them. Now, to me, that's an indication of we at least have a plan, right? Again, it's a year of difference, and even if games during that era were not as complex as they are now, 1 year is still not a lot of time to create a full game, So I do think that they had a plan, and notice how they changed the voice actor for the second game. They brought Yuri Lowenthal again for the third game when he was regaining himself, but they had a different one for the Warrior Within game. And also the voice to me is similar. It's not the same timbre, but the voice is very similar to the one that the Dark Prince has. So I think that during the second game, we were playing as the Dark Prince. It was that manifestation, right? This was a guy who at least for 6 years, because if I'm not mistaken, Forgotten Sands happens a year after the first game. So at least, and we know that Warrior Within happened 7 years after the first game. So at least for 6 years, the prince was being traumatized. He was being haunted by an unstoppable force of nature. That really destroys the psyche of a person. He was in a very dark place. The prince, to me, it makes sense. Even the music made sense, because to me, the music is very, I think the term is diegetic. The music reflects what the prince is feeling. And so, it makes sense that there's this metal soundtrack right there that is more aggressive. That's a reflection on his personality at the time, on his state of mind at the time. And nowhere is this more explicit than the first song that plays when the Haka is chasing you is I Stand Alone by Godsmack. I think it couldn't be more obvious, right? It's a huge representation of his state of mind. Notice how the tone changes again after the Haka, after that threat is gone. He regains himself, the tone, the color, the music changes in the third game because he's again regaining his past self. Also, another piece of evidence that I have that the Dark Prince that we controlled the Dark Prince in the second game. And maybe this is just me reading too much into it. Everything that I do is read too much into things, but when you boot up the game, when you boot up Warrior Within, the title track that plays on the stage, on the menu screen, when you select new game, whatever, that track is called Warrior Within or Welcome Within, something like that. What's interesting about that track is that before the guitars and the drums and the bass, before they start, they have this ominous choir in the background. It's a choir. It's a very distinctive voice happening in the background. And then when that choir finishes, that's when the music starts. That's when the rest of the instruments come in and they start with the punchiness and everything. That choir plays the exact same choir, by the way, the exact same melody plays in the two thrones after you beat the vizier, where you go to the mental realm. All you hear, aside from the Dark Prince's voice and the little sound effects of the little platforming things that are turning and whatnot, all you hear is that same choir. The same melody, same voice, same sound. It's the same. What's the difference? No punchiness, because there's no fighting. But that choir is there. Those types of things, especially considering that Stuart Chadwood, he composed the music for the 3 games. Those things don't happen on accident, right? Those are artistic decisions, in my opinion. So I believe that's a very nice connection. I do believe that if the prince is different in the second game, it's a story reason. It goes, and yes, I know it's obvious, but it goes beyond the Haka is chasing you. It's more like my psyche is broken. All I can do is fight. That's all I can do. And what does the Dark Prince tell the prince in the 3rd game? To me, a true warrior fixes everything with a sword. And that was his mentality in the 2nd game. Everything needs to be fixed with a sword. I think it was great. I think I love the ending of the 3rd game, by the way. I love how when Farah asks, how did you really know my name? He gave the same exact speech that he gives at the beginning of Sands of Time. That's beautiful. It's very poetic. I really, really, really enjoyed that ending. Because you could deduce maybe that the 1st game is being narrated not at the end of the 1st game, before fighting the vizier, but maybe the 1st game is being narrated at the end of the 3rd game, and he's going to tell her everything. I don't know. It's a nice thing to think about. As for a personal interpretation of what the Dark Prince is, I was thinking, what if the Dark Prince, what if it's not something from the prince, but from the Dagger of Time? Because if you pay attention, the vizier, when you get to the palace, when you hear the vizier explaining to Kailina before he kills her, he says that the dagger spoke to him, that he would hear voices telling me, go conquer, go get power, etc., etc., etc. When do we start hearing voices in the Prince of Persia 3, in Two Thrones? After we get the dagger. And what are those voices? Go, conquer, get what's yours, get what's rightfully yours. I think that perhaps the dagger, the dagger has like a spirit or something, and that influences whoever wields it. Because look at the vizier. The vizier effectively completes his goal. He gets power, and that's it, right? And then he gets rid of the dagger, and now it's just the vizier. It's us. It's the prince who gets the dagger and starts hearing voices. And voices similar to what they were telling the vizier. Go, get power, get what's yours. I think that's an interesting thing to consider. I think my other interpretation of what the Dark Prince could be, and again, all of these two are just conjecture. It's just fun to think about. Because I never see too much theory crafting about these games, but I really like them, so whatever. I was thinking, what if the Dark Prince is like a remnant of the Dahaka that's attached to the prince? Because notice that the Dark Prince always goes away with water. And what's the Dahaka vulnerable to? Water. I mean, the Dahaka, that enmity, that deity, that protector of the timeline. I mean, you could buy a water gun and you're pretty much immune to it. He falls to a lake and dies. So water is a no-no for the Haka. So I thought that was an interesting decision. It was an interesting decision. So I thought maybe this is. Kailina, I think Kailina is an empress in title only, but I feel like the Island of Time. I feel like the Island of Time was. How do I put this? Because I've always felt here's something that I forgot to mention before. These games from this era, by the way. This is something I said on my games I played on 2021 video. Games from this era, they always make me wonder. For some reason, these games they always trigger my imagination. I always want to know more. And nowhere is this more true than in the Island of Time. Every time I play that game, and in fact that was another reason why I always replayed Warrior Within when I was younger, when I was a teenager, is because the Island of Time is fascinating to me. Everything about it made me think, I want to know more. I want to explore every single nook and cranny of this island. This time around, I feel that the Island of Time was Jin territory. That's all there is to it. I think it was Jin territory. And I think that it wasn't Kailina's island. I think Kailina is a victim. I feel like Kailina is just someone who was taken from the island as a slave and she was transformed into the sands. Another interpretation is that Kailina is the sands impersonated. I don't know. But there is this, how do I put this, desperation about her. And she doesn't feel like a ruler. That's what I'm trying to say. She doesn't feel like a ruler. Also, there's this huge tomb in the island. Huge tomb, protected by waters and everything. This happens after your first fight with Kailina. After you activate the towers and the Haka chases you. You get to this tomb. I feel like this is the tomb of a ruler. This is the tomb of someone who was the king of this island. This is, I don't know. Just fun stuff to think about. I think that's all I have to say about this. Great games, by the way. All I'm saying is they're great games. They're great games. It was fun going. It was fun revisiting these games. First of all, I finally have my answer why I dislike Sands of Time. And I got a greater appreciation for the other two. For the most part, or for most of my life, I've said that my favorite was Warrior Within. And this time around, replaying them, I think it's still my favorite. I think it's just amazing. It's just really good. True Thrones, to be honest, True Thrones doesn't beat it in my eyes. I think just because of the nostalgia factor. And I think that's all there is to it. But the True Thrones, I had such a blast this time around playing the True Thrones. Because the True Thrones combines everything. Because in the Sands of Time, you have a lot of puzzles. In Warrior Within, you don't have too many puzzles, but you have better combat. True Thrones has both. You have some puzzles, not the best puzzles, but it has some puzzles that are very nice. And you have great combat. You have, again, leaning more towards stealth, but the system is still there, right? The options are still there, so you can mess around with all the possibilities that you have to dispatch of enemies. You have you have the life upgrades and everything. It's fantastic. What else did I need to say about these games? I talked about the island. I talked about Jins. I mentioned Razia. I mentioned my theories about the Dark Prince. Water Sword. Yeah, I have nothing else to mention. I have nothing else to say. I think that's it for me. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.